a couple of minutes after the hour. We've had another large response to our webinar. So we're going to let people get settled in, make sure that audio is connected, and we'll get started just a couple of minutes after the hour. While you're waiting, if you'd like to use the chat feature to share what agency you might be representing, or what business you're with, or what neighborhood you're with, please feel free to use that. It's always kind of fun to see who's joining us. Hi, Isaac. Hi, Kristen. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Again, feel free to use that chat as you're entering to share what neighborhood or what group you might be representing today. So it looks like we've got everyone just about settled in here. So again, welcome to the City of Mesa's Climate Action Plan Community Input Session. Today, we're going to be discussing materials management. My name is Teresa Jackson, and I'm with a firm called Greenplay, and we're supporting the City of Mesa with the community engagement portion of the Climate Action Plan. And developing community-based action items is really a key goal of the cities. So today's meeting is in a webinar format. All of you as participants are currently muted. However, during the second half of the meeting, we really want to hear from you. And so there'll be two ways that you can engage. You can share your ideas, your comments, ask questions using the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature and I can unmute you and you can engage directly with our panelists. So through our community engagement process, we want to gather input from all areas and demographics of the community. So before we begin, I want to launch 3 quick polls so we can get a better understanding of who we're reaching. So our first poll today, there we go. If you could select which best describes you. Do you live in Mesa, work in Mesa, play in Mesa, study in Mesa, or perhaps own a business? We're just over 80%. I'm going to give it another few seconds here. There we go, 100%. Thank you. Our next poll here is on ethnicity. What is your ethnicity? White, Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, Native American, American Indian, Asian Pacific Islander, or other? And you can select multiple here. Okay, it looks like we got just about everyone. And I have one more for you, and it's tied to which area of Mesa best identifies. So select the council district that you live or most frequently visit in Mesa. And we've got council district 1 through 6, and you should also be seeing a map there on your screen. I'm going to give it a couple more seconds here. All right, thank you. So to kick things off today, I'd like to introduce Scott Boucher. Scott is the Director of the Environmental Management and Sustainability Department for the City of Mesa. Scott, can you take a few moments to introduce the CAP and our panelists today?
Most certainly. Thank you, Teresa, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to getting your input during this webinar. So first, let me just start with how we kind of got to where we're at today. This is a council-led initiative as far as having a climate action plan. Our council meets once a year and does a strategic planning session and comes up with strategic initiatives. And last year, they came up with one which was a healthy environment. And you can see right there, it's to proactively and responsibly protect and conserve Mesa's environment and natural resources to mitigate climate change by reducing carbon pollution. So once the council had adopted that initiative, they asked staff to go back and develop a climate action plan. So through some presentations to our city council at our study sessions, we presented some options for the council, and finally we got some direction from them, and we came up with the final climate action plan, which was released and approved by the council in June of this year. Now, this is a plan that will evolve over time. We understand that there's going to be new technologies and new resources, new ways of doing things. That's some of the stuff that we hope to even gather from you today. And so we do understand this is a living document and will evolve over time. We can go to the next one. So there is a couple of different ways. Obviously, you participating today in this webinar, we have been able to reach you, and you've been able to see some of the information we have either on the city's webpage with our climate action plan, or the Footprint Future Mesa website that we have also. So we would encourage you to visit those websites. There's other ways and other opportunities for you to be engaged in the process as we're working on refining our climate action plan, or to stay informed or see the data that we are currently collecting. So if you can go to the next slide. This is just an example of our healthy environment data dashboard. So this is available on our website. It shows you some of the current performance metrics that we have and what we are measuring as far as whether or not it is the number of street lamps that we have and what type of those street lamps. It's natural gas consumption in our city facilities, electric consumption, water consumption. This gives you a good idea of what the city is currently measuring and the progress we're making towards our aspirational goals, which leads into the next slide. So in the climate action plan, we do have 4 aspirational goals. These goals are carbon neutrality, so achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And we're also striving to reduce the city's carbon footprint for city operations by 50% by 2030. So I will hit on with the current climate action plan. It does focus on city operations. So that means things that the city has day-to-day responsibility for. With renewable energy, we're also looking at 100% renewable energy by 2050. In materials management, which we'll be talking about today, is to divert 90% of the waste that's currently going to the landfill by 2050. Now, aspirational goal number 4 is also something that we're working on today, and that's the community action. So this will be the first aspirational goal that we intend on meeting, which will be to the next climate action plan will focus beyond just city operations and look at the city as a whole. So what we felt, though, is that we need to get your input as the community in order to develop those goals. So you'll see that we have 6 focus areas that the climate action plan focuses on: energy, air quality, heat mitigation, water stewardship, materials management, and food systems. I want people to understand that the reason why we have these categories is so that we can easily be able to point people in direction of things that we're measuring, or programs that we're putting in place, or progress that we're making in these areas. But these areas are not silos. They were all interconnected to each other. One of those that I like to put out or point out is if you save water, you're also saving energy. And by what I mean by that is there's a water energy nexus. So there's a lot of energy that is put into producing the clean drinking water that we deliver to residents and businesses every day. And in addition to that, there's even more energy that is put into cleaning that water when it goes to our wastewater treatment plants. So folks understanding that if you save water, you're actually saving energy. And when you save energy, you're reducing emissions that are coming from the energy that we use, because that's not 100% renewable energy or carbon-free energy that we're using right now. So that also helps with air quality and heat mitigation. So all of these are interrelated is what I like to make sure that people understand. So the first part of developing the climate action plan for city operations was to look at what our carbon footprint is. And you'll see here, there's kind of 5 categories that are the majority of the emissions that the city has from our operations. That's employee commute and mobile combustion. So that's employees driving to and from work, and then employees driving at work. There's building electricity, street lighting, and water distribution facilities, which that ties right along with what I just talked about with that water energy nexus. On the next slide. And then in addition to that, Maricopa County did in 2018 a community greenhouse gas emissions inventory that looks at the community as a whole. And so as we move forward with a community climate action plan, this is data that we'll be using as our baseline as we're moving forward and looking at carbon reductions as a community as a whole. So with that, I am going to now turn it over to 2 folks that are very knowledgeable in the area of materials management. We have Ms. Lauren Whitaker, who is a special projects manager in the Environmental Management and Sustainability Department, and Isaiah Garcia Romero, who is an operations research analyst in the Environmental Management and Sustainability Department. So I'm going to turn this over to them, and they're going to kind of present what the city of Mesa is doing right now.
And thank you, Scott. And as we begin our segment, we'll start with the following poll question. And so on average, how many pounds of municipal solid waste is generated per person per day in the United States? So how many trash and recyclable materials are generated per person per day in the United States? You have several options here: 1.9, 2.9, 3.9, 4.9, or 5.9 pounds per day.
Right about 80%. I'm going to give it a few more seconds here, and then we'll share these results. Okay, here they come.
Hey, great job, everyone. And so based on the most recent EPA report, if you answered 4.9%, 6 out of the 16, you answered correctly. That is based on the most recent EPA report of the generated tons per day per person. Now, as we move on and continue with that information, it is important to note that the EPA defines sustainable materials management as using and reusing materials more productively over their entire life cycles. It represents a change in how our society thinks about the use of natural resources and environmental protection. As you can see by the life cycle wheel here, our products begin with material extraction, manufacturing, distribution, usage, and finally that end of life management, which is the component that we are attributing to sustainable materials management. The most preferred is reusing, followed by recycling, composition, energy recovery, and the last preferred is landfilling. By examining how materials are used throughout their life cycle, an SMM approach seeks to use those materials in the most productive way with an emphasis on using less. We should reduce those toxic chemicals and the environmental impacts throughout the materials life cycle in order for us to be assured that we have sufficient resources to not only meet today's needs, but those of the future. Now, the challenges that we're currently experiencing obviously have to do with the greenhouse gas emissions and the volatile organic compounds that are exhumed through the materials we utilize in our day-to-day responsibilities here within city operations, which include new construction and facility maintenance. Waste obviously continues to be a great problem. Before the 1950s, products were typically made to be high quality and reusable. We had refill models such as the milkman, which were extremely popular. We repaired, repurposed, or reused many of the things we used to own. We covered our shoes and mended our clothes, valuing timeless items that were made to last and could be handed down generation to generation. Today, however, we produce and buy 70 times more than we did in the 1950s, 99% of which becomes waste within that first 12 months of purchase. All of this because of the amazing affordability and that convenience of using something once and then throwing it away. We need to be mindful to reduce the waste in regards to city operations. That's the city purchases, and then the city purchase that we do utilize to be able to reuse those materials as well. diverting and managing the waste streams. The current post-collection infrastructure and the transportation chains are controlled by the private sector. While we contract and partner, we are beholden to those private facilities. And when they're no longer in business, we can't recycle or provide that end-of-life management in a fiscally efficient and responsible way. Therefore, however, we do have some City of Mesa programs in order to manage those materials sustainably. We have our waste collection, our recycle collection, appliance and scrap metal recycling, backyard composting program, and our Christmas tree recycling. As I delve a little bit further into each of those programs, we'll notice that the material trends correlated to our sustainable management approach are the tonnage, the vegetative, and the recyclables that are disposed annually. As you can see here, tonnage continues to increase year over year. While 2020 was an atypical year, which showed about 3% higher tonnage collected, based on the first 2 quarters of this year alone, the projected impact was at approximately 350,000 tons, given the heavy monsoon trends we experienced. However, as the third quarter stabilized, we anticipate a much lower tonnage yield, yet still on pace to be slightly higher than that atypical 2020 year. Vegetative materials are diverted from the landfill through those private facility partnerships. They are collected and converted into compost and mulch, as well as repurposed raw material for other applications. Our recyclable materials are also landfilled from landfills through the same private facility partnerships that we utilize within the city. The materials are sorted, bundled, and sold in open recycling commodities. As mentioned previously, the private entities do control all the post-collection facilities that process the materials. Without that component, due to physical catastrophes like a fire that disabled an entire facility, to contract negotiations that broke due to market fluctuations and public vulnerabilities in the region, we do see that we aren't able to manage those materials as efficiently and sustainably as we ultimately could. And as we continue to analyze the materials that we are sustainably collecting, appliance and scrap metal tonnage continues to be diverted once again through those private post-collection facilities. Our compost barrel program is extremely popular and it's increasing year over year. Those programs do divert landfill material for private residential use. We offer that Christmas tree recycling at 5 different sites throughout the city immediately following the holiday season, which diverts them from the landfill into the vegetative stream. A partnership with Game and Fish also exists. Out of all of the collected materials, 22% of that is used by that entity to use those trees to create estuaries for fish in several bodies of water locally. In addition, Lauren will share with you additional components of our diversion activities.
Thank you, Isaias. We also wanted to bring forward a couple of other City of Mesa programs that we do for waste reduction. One being the Household Hazardous Materials Facility, where we collect items such as oil, gas, light bulbs, batteries, paint. 40% of those materials are still in good shape, and we divert those to the swap shop, which is a free resource for City of Mesa residents if they have a project or if there's a 3/4 of a bottle of pesticide. It's available there in the swap shop. As part of the swap shop, we have a robust paint reuse program. So we do mix and reuse the latex paint that we get in from residents. That paint goes into 5-gallon buckets and is put in the swap shop for residents to use for free. We also have an appliance repair program where we have a vendor who will come and repair appliances and resell them to further extend their life. And several other recycling programs such as cooking oil to biodiesel, which is very popular during Thanksgiving time. We also won an award for specifically waste reduction from Arizona Forward in 2019. And so I wanted to point that out as well. And next slide. Yep. So one of the other programs that the City of Mesa has is a food to energy program. So we completed a feasibility study in 2020 to look at the technical, operational, and financial feasibility of taking commercial food waste, putting it into our wastewater treatment plant, and creating biogas from that to use to fuel our renewable natural gas vehicles. This program is in phase 1, in design of phase 1. So that should be constructed by 2023. It saves us room in the landfill and helps with waste reduction as well. So one of the things historically that everybody knows is reduce, reuse, recycle. And it's in that order for a reason. But more recently, there are a lot more R's as part of that. So we challenge everyone to rethink their relationship with things and with stuff. We can't recycle our way out of our consumption issues and single use, but we can rethink and repair and reduce the amount that we are using. There are countless studies that are proving that stuff doesn't really make you happy. There's a lot of other things that will. One thing, so my favorite quote up here is have good stuff, not too much, mostly reclaimed, care for it and pass it on. So back to that 1950s model that Isaiah was talking about. Be mindful of your relationship with things, avoid single-use items, do your research. There's a lot of what we call greenwashing, where people put on their products that they are recyclable or better for the environment than they actually are. And also buy secondhand. I wanted to show you a Mesa business, which is Revive IT. So they are on Broadway Road. They actually take electronics and refurbish them and resell them along with a warranty. They're a great corporation. There's also countrywide options such as Loop is a new program. You can order from very big brands, reusable containers. It'll come shipped to your doorstep in a tote bag. And when you're done with the containers, you can put them back and they will go back and get reused. You can also do a quick Google search for any number of tips and tricks to make less waste. I know with Christmas coming up, one of my favorites is a Japanese style wrapping with reusable cloth, which is called furoshiki gift wrapping. There's also things like shopping at the local farmers market that helps to reduce packaging, buying secondhand like we already talked about, reusable grocery bags and water bottles, and now there's even Ziploc bags that you can reuse. So with that, we are interested in hearing what you have to say about materials management and waste reduction. So I'll pass it back over to Scott.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, very much. And Isaiah, it's very informative. So as Lauren had said, now is the opportunity for us to hear from you. There's a couple of different ways. As Teresa had mentioned, you can raise your hand and ask, or you can use the chat feature. So.
Okay, and we have our first question that's come into the chat. It's from Dominic. What is the solution to become more independent of the private sector to handle Mesa's recycling? 3% recycling rate is not in step with a sustainable community.
Okay, Lauren, Isaiah, which one of you would like to take that?
I can go ahead and cover that one. So the City of Mesa is looking at different options for post-collection infrastructure. We currently are in a contract for an analysis on a transfer station and potential materials recycling facility that could be a partnership with other municipalities in the community. Further, we have a request for information out to the public currently that is very broad, asking for waste processing solutions and ways to help us get to the 90% diversion goal in 2050. So that is all available to the public right now. We are hoping to have results from the analysis early next year.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess I'm just going to add to that even with, and this is something that I've said, that our waste issue that we have in the United States, we will not be able to just recycle our way out of this. Even if the City of Mesa owns post-collection facilities, we own our own materials recovery facility. we're still going to be dependent upon the private sector to then take that material. So as Isaiah has pointed out, this material will end up being sorted, baled, and then shipped off to someone. It is shipped off to private businesses, and those private businesses need to be able to create something new with that material. So if it's a plastic water bottle, it's cardboard, it's paper, whatever it may be, they need to be able to create something new with it, and they need to be able to do that in a profitable manner. Because if they're not able to do that in a profitable manner, obviously that's not a business that's going to survive. So while we are looking at this, it is an important component of what we are doing. We're also asking the community in the city of Mesa to really look at those first two R's of reduce and reuse. Recycling should be the last option, simply because it is so dependent upon a lot of movement, which creates carbon emissions, and then it is a very complex system. So the more we can reduce the need for that complex system to be used, the better off we're going to be long term.
Scott, that's absolutely correct. And just to contribute a little bit more information on that, we do service approximately 124,000 residential accounts. And so if you think about each individual account and the materials that are generated based on that poll question that we shared with you earlier, in order for us to be sustainable, not only do we need to own our own post collection infrastructure, but also reduce and reuse as best as we can. If 124,000 residential accounts with a population of more than 500,000 residents in the city of Mesa alone, we contribute our part and limit that pound and those consumption and that public consumerism, we can essentially do our very minimal part to affect a grand system.
Thank you,
Right.
Isaiah.
Thank you. All right, we've got another question here from Macy. Right now, ASU composts a lot of food waste. How does composting compare to the food to energy program in difficulty, environmental impact, ability to divert food waste, costs, etc.? Also, what resources are needed to convert food into energy?
That's a loaded question. I'm happy to take it. So just to go through the basics, what we're looking at is our wastewater treatment plant, our anaerobic digesters. It's a fully contained system that processes food waste very quickly compared to if you were to put it in a landfill or even in a compost pile. So that would be probably one of the main benefits, is that composting does take up a significant amount of space, and the end product is not necessarily always as usable, depending on how much contamination you get when you are composting. So we have a way to create biogas, which we have a direct use for in the city, and that does help us with our renewable energy goals as well. We already own the structures in the facilities. For the anaerobic digester, we have excess capacity, so we do not need to purchase new land and start an entire new program for the composting. And then let me look at some of the details in the question here. Cost-wise, I think composting it does not have the same incentives that the food to energy program has. So through the renewable fuel standard issued by the EPA, we do get an incentive for using that renewable biogas in our transportation vehicles, so in our solid waste collection vehicles. And that really makes the program stand out as far financially. Anything I missed, Scott?
I would just build on that a little bit, that it talks about, I think it talks about the amount that we'd be able to take, or difficulty, environmental ability to burn food waste. So our anaerobic digesters won't be able to take all of the food waste that is generated from the city of Mesa. It's approximately about 10,000 tons. So to put that into a comparison, we collect about 30,000 tons of material from the Blue Barrel. And so it is one piece to the puzzle that helps avoid stuff going to the landfill. It also creates a commodity in renewable natural gas that the city uses, because we have a natural gas fleet of solid waste vehicles. and there are financial incentives to it. So that makes it make sense financially. So it helps to hit that triple bottom line. The one thing I want to make sure, and this kind of leads into maybe a teaser for next week's webinar, is the highest and best use for an apple is for folks to eat that apple. And so this isn't a situation where we want food that is edible food that we're taking and putting into an anaerobic digester. We want the apple core after it has been used to feed people. So this is just one piece of the puzzle. When we look at those 6 focus areas, if we went back to that and looked at those, this is a component that fits into that. So that food component, when there is food waste that is generated, which will be generated, that you can use it to produce renewable energy, and that renewable energy is used in our vehicles that have less emissions than if it was a diesel vehicle. So.
Thanks. Our next question is from Kristen. Is the food waste only from commercial sources? Do the vehicles using the biogas need to be modified to use it?
So the food waste, when we did the feasibility study, we focused on large commercial areas that have a large amount of food waste that is usually less contaminated. So the feasibility study did focus on commercial food waste. And as far as the vehicles, they do not need to be modified at all. We are upgrading, the plan is to upgrade the biogas and put it direct into our gas pipeline. We're cleaning it up to pipeline gas standards.
Thank you, Lauren. And I'll just build on that a little bit of where we are at. So we're at a point right now with the food to energy program that we still have a significant amount of work that needs to be put in before we'll actually be able to collect, process, and inject the food waste into our natural gas utility. But what we do have right now is a wastewater treatment plant that is currently generating biogas that we are in design. We're at 90% design and anticipate beginning construction next year to take that existing biogas and put it into our natural gas utility. And that will power about half of the fleet that we have. So this is what we like to refer to as phase 1 of the food to energy program, which we have dubbed Flare to Fuel. But I think it helps build on when you see these aspirational goals of 2050. This is a perfect example of a project that's going to take a significant amount of time to implement fully, but it's taking a pragmatic approach where we are doing what we can as we can and taking small steps to reach those aspirational goals. So we're not going to be able to get to 100% renewable energy overnight. It's going to take time. It's not going to be done with one project. It's going to be done with a series of projects over years.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we have another question here. Were the material trends stats from city government only, or does that include any data from residents?
Those figures are from both. They are city operations and the residential waste that's collected as well. It's all encompassing the entire total tonnage, and those are the materials that we operate and collect. And so, like Scott mentioned at the beginning, the current phase of the climate action plan is focused on city operations. And so as part of our department's future is to be able to analyze how we're going to limit and manage those materials that we, our own operations, produce. But then also as part of this community outreach is how do we then reach the entire community and those entire goals to be able to sustainably manage our materials as a whole.
And I'll build on that a little bit, Teresa, that with the city of Mesa, so we have, if you're a city of Mesa resident, so you live in a single family home in the city of Mesa, you have to have the city of Mesa solid waste service. But if you are a business within the city of Mesa, we actually compete in an open market. So even though we do provide that service to businesses, businesses have a choice if they want to use a private provider or if they want to use the city. So one of the next steps as we look at this community-wide plan, we go beyond city operations, is looking at businesses that then you can see the complexity that comes into play. Now this is a business in the city of Mesa who doesn't use the city of Mesa solid waste for their services, but yet we're trying to measure and implement measures to reduce the amount of materials that they are needing to dispose of while not having that direct connection to them. So this is part of why we're doing this series, and we'll continue to do more outreach both to our residents and our business communities, because we don't have control over everything that happens within the city. But what we're trying to do is help guide some of these decisions that are being made community-wide.
Thanks, Scott. I want to again encourage all of our attendees that you can use the chat to pose questions or share your ideas on what you think should be considered for the community climate action plan. And you can also use the raise hand feature that's on your Zoom toolbar, and I can unmute you and you can engage directly with our panelists today if you would like.
And I guess I'll even build on that a little, Teresa. I've seen that there's a lot of students from ASU Poly, a great school. That's actually where I got my master's degree, was at the Poly campus in Mesa. And so I'm very interested to hear from some of the students, their thoughts and ideas. There may be things that come up that we haven't thought of, or ideas that we'd be able to pursue. I know I had spoken at one of the classes at the beginning of the year, and in my mind, it's the students of today who are going to help put together the solutions of tomorrow. So we are very interested in hearing your thoughts.
So I would give our attendees just maybe a moment to collect their thoughts on what questions they may have. Lauren, Isaiah, are there things that have come to mind for you as we've been discussing things today, things that you're seeing trends across the country, or specific things in your own facilities that you'd like to share?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about electronic recycling. It's something I'm passionate about as part of the Household Hazardous Materials Facility, and also part of Arizona Forward, which is a collective of municipal and private entities and nonprofits. When looking at the circular economy with electronics, it's very interesting because it's growing. One of the highest and fastest growing forms of waste in the world, actually. And there's a lot in the news about it right now. So there's a lot in the news about the right to repair. So making sure that people have the ability to upgrade and repair their cell phones or other electronic materials. And so electronics has been a really big part of it. There's a lot of heavy metals and a lot of things in there that can be recovered. I mean, there's even small hints of gold in some of those electronics, and people are still throwing that away in their black barrels. So I do want to encourage all of our residents to make sure you come to the Household Hazardous Materials Facility. And if you're not a Mesa resident, find a facility who will take electronics and refurbish them and make sure that they're properly recycled.
Great, thank you. Oh, we have another question that has come in here. Is there a plan to make other facilities to step away from the private sector in the context of waste management?
And so I'll take this one. And while Lauren had mentioned about that feasibility study that we're currently undertaking and identifying some of those infrastructures that we can utilize, there is that component that at the end of that life cycle, if it is not reused or repurposed in one way or another, it will have to end up at a location. A lot of times those locations are definitely owned by private sectors. And so in the grand scheme of the entire life cycle of a product, that private sector, that private market will exist. And so as part of the public, part of that stewardship, we are encouraging a lot of those first R's, that reuse, reduce, and do our part and manage what we can and control what we can, so that that private sector and those ultimate entities that we have minimal control over, what we can't control, we should at the forefront.
Great, thank you. So I was taking a look quickly just at, I know many of you have been to our Footprint Mesa website, and I was taking a look at some of the ideas that have come through the site. There's quite a bit on further developing recycling programs to include apartment complexes. There's also an idea that was posted that received a couple of likes here, and it was consider a surcharge on each plastic beverage bottle sold. I know that's something that's been done in Colorado in a handful of cities. Is that something that Mesa has ever looked at?
I'll take this one. So there have been cities that have looked at, specifically there were cities that looked at plastic bags. So if you think about the plastic bags that you get at a grocery store or any retail outlet, typically that plastic bag is used to get from the store to the car, and then from the car to the house, and then you're done with it. And so there were cities that looked at banning those plastic bags or making a charge for those plastic bags. But our state legislature has actually put in place a state law that prevents cities from having bans of materials. So currently, state law prohibits cities from doing any of those sort of bottle bills or plastic bag bans. And so that was something that the state legislature has passed and would only be able to change if in fact there was a change at the state legislature. So folks that listen to this, that there's limits to what the city can do. I think we got into that a little bit too about the private sector and needing to partner with the private sector, that we can't solve the solution all by ourselves, but there also is things that are going to happen with the state level and really the federal level in order for the city to be able to continue to make a difference. There's just only so much you can do at the local level, even though local government is the closest to the people. The city is regulated by both the state and the federal government on what we can and can't do.
Thanks, Scott. No, I think that is important to frame that it's a puzzle and you're a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question, how can we make companies or corporations more responsible for the waste they create and put into consumers' hands? Got some examples such as plastics and electronics. And can you tell me if there's a solution in the future to plastic clamshell packaging?
I can go ahead and take this one. So how we can make companies and corporations more responsible. There are different policies that other states have implemented. Like Scott said, we have a restriction on being able to ban materials. The big push I see in other states is extended producer responsibility. So that is ensuring that when the company produces the bottle of cleaning fluid, that they are helping to make sure it gets disposed of properly and it doesn't just go to the landfill. So there's different programs. The ones that come to mind are actually Colorado has a paint reuse program. So that's initiated statewide that when you sell paint, part of that money goes back to taking paint back when people are done with it. There's also ones with batteries. So there's a large battery recycling and producer responsibility. There's other legislation where people are pushing back on, or policies where people are pushing back on the producers for packaging labeling. So flushable wipes being one of them. Flushable wipes are not actually flushable. I know California just passed a law that they need better packaging. So there's a lot that goes back to the companies and corporations that are policies that are growing in the United States. And then as far as plastic clamshell packaging, I think, please tell me there's a solution. I think that there are more and more areas coming out with packaging free, like more restaurants, or not restaurants, more grocery stores, more programs that are available, farmers markets, wherever you can avoid the plastic clamshell. And there might be some alternatives to that as well if you check online.
Okay, our next question, I hope I'm framing it correctly here. It relates to masks. And how are you dealing with the recycling of used masks? Any specific program in place?
Maybe I'll just take this one. The best thing you can do is have a reusable mask. There is not a market right now for recycling of a used disposable mask. Now, understanding that a mask needs to be cleaned, that you can't wear it forever, but it can be reusable and it can be washed and cleaned and then reused. That's going to be your best bet. It goes back to there simply is not enough processes to take every single use disposable item that we use in the United States and turn it into something else. I'm afraid that some people think, well, if I use enough of these, then somebody will figure out a way to use them. That's typically not the case. What happens is they end up getting thrown away. They're called single-use items for a reason, because they get used one time and then they get thrown away. So the best thing you can do, again, is reduce and reuse. With mask, I know reduce maybe isn't the option. You want to be able to use that mask, but reuse is definitely an option with a mask.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Can you speak to how the city itself is being a responsible consumer? That's our next question.
Lauren or Isaiah, you want to take it at all, or you want me to?
Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the departments all have to abide by the climate action plan has been adopted and implemented by the city council. And so they are looking at sustainable ways and being responsible. And so while I can't add to specifics on how specific departments are being responsible consumers, I can say that they do need to, with the climate action plan and the aspirational goals, have to implement that within their processes and then their path moving forward. Change that's obviously taken place here in recent months with the adoption of the climate action plan.
Yes, and I guess I'll just thank you, Isaiah. I'll build on that a little bit and we'll go back to what we are looking at with consumers. So our purchasing department for many years has done a wonderful job of making sure that we are buying products, in our departments that we're only buying products that we need. We're buying them in quantities that we will use. And we're trying our best not to over purchase on things that we're getting. In addition to that, we are now pushing more towards buying more recyclable products that are used and have recycled content in them. But I think one of the things that the city, and as Isaiah said, with now as part of the climate action plan, all the departments meet with our city manager twice a year and go over our performance metrics, and all departments now are required to have metrics that relate to the climate action plan and the aspirational goals. So that's going to help push even further into the city, the sustainability culture that we have. But it's something that the city has done that I think households need to do too. Is you buy what you need and you use what you buy. And that way you don't end up going to the household hazardous materials facility and bringing materials that you no longer need because you purchased more than you needed. And you don't create that waste to begin with. So that's the biggest way in which we're trying to tackle that. With more to come as the climate action plan pushes that culture again of sustainability even further in the organization.
Great, thank you. I love this next one here. It's a reflection and a question. So it starts with, I'm old enough to remember the requirement to sort recyclables and was amazed when valley-wide recycling programs allowed consumers to place everything into one barrel. I love that comment there. I actually remember when I was a kid, that was one of my chores. I had to rinse the recyclables and sort them. So the question here is, I greatly appreciate the convenience of placing everything in one barrel, but by the sounds of contamination issues, has it been detrimental to the success of recycling?
And that is a great observation and a great question, because unfortunately it has. While it is convenient to have the one barrel, the one collection, and that available disposable location, unfortunately it does create that opportunity for excess material or items that you cannot dispose of in your trash barrel would essentially end up in the recycle barrel. And then because a recycle barrel is not, as the past practices, open and, you know, sorted, and you can see the materials that you're collecting and what you're disposing. It's all in one barrel, one lid closed. You can't see through it. It does lead to that no longer of the practice of cleaning the material, ensuring that it's acceptable and ensuring that it's going to ultimately be recycled by that post-collection infrastructure. Like I mentioned in my previous presentation, that recycling and the recovery facility sorts the entire commodity, sorts the entire product. And through that sorting process, the contamination is where they try to pull it out. However, that is costly. There are obviously, it's not foolproof. The contamination does get through. And ultimately, if it's not a viable product of that bundle to be able to be marketed and sold, it essentially does not get marketed and sold. And so while it is convenient for an individual to have that one container to dispose of, it does create opportunities for, unfortunately, wasteful and inconvenient practices on the end on the end of that life cycle.
And I'll add a little bit about plastics too. So it is a sign of the complexity of the materials that we purchase nowadays. Back when people would sort, it would be newspaper, aluminum, and glass. Plastic has really complicated a lot of our recycling. We have plastics designated 1 through 7, but there are many categories under each of those numbers, and there's a lot of different chemistry. So it gets even more complicated when you're looking at an end market for those type of materials. So I just wanted to point that out as well. That is a big part of it.
Yes, and I'll just build a little bit even more onto that with two different things. And the examples that Lauren is giving is we're also seeing a lot more complexity in the packaging. So I'll use applesauce as an example. I remember applesauce came in the glass jar and you would have applesauce and you would pour it out. That glass jar would be recyclable. Now it comes in many different types of containers, many of them single use, single serving, plastic pouches that actually have different layers in there. So it's no longer made with one material of glass. It has multiple layers of different components that are in there, combinations of metals and plastics, that there really is not a way to recycle those. And one of the things that I think that the Blue Barrel has then created is with the changes in complexity to packaging, in addition to the Blue Barrel giving folks the perception that if I put it in the Blue Barrel, I have recycled, it has created an issue that now we do have that contamination, we have complexity. That's why at the City of Mesa, we encourage folks, we've limited what is acceptable in the recycle barrel because we know that those materials will be recycled. So it really is, when in doubt whether or not it's recyclable, you are better off to leave it out of the Blue Barrel. Because when you put things into the Blue Barrel that don't belong, they tend to contaminate what is recyclable material. They increase our cost, and it actually does more damage than it does good. So one of the things with our recycling program, if you're in doubt of whether or not it's recyclable, we do have a Recycle Wizard app that you can look up on any of the app stores, the Play stores. But if you're in doubt, the best bet is to leave it out of the Blue Barrel.
Thank you. Okay, we're coming to the bottom of the hour. We've got another comment and question here that we'll close out with. So Rachel says, agree. I would much rather have people who thoughtfully recycle, hopefully more and more who care, than most of it going to the landfill. Also, apologies if I missed the topic. What is the update on recycling in Mesa?
Maybe I'll take the last part because I know it's been in the news a lot on the update with recycling in the City of Mesa. So there have been a lot of things that have happened over the last 2 years at the City of Mesa. If you went back to September of 2019, the City of Mesa had 3 separate contracts with 3 separate private entities that all were accepting recyclable materials in the East Valley. We are currently down to 1 vendor who accepts recyclable materials at a facility in the East Valley. 1 facility burned down and has not been rebuilt, and the other one canceled a contract, a long-term contract that they have with the City of Mesa. So what we are doing, and this was kind of discussed in the beginning, Lauren and Isaiah are taking the lead. We have two things. We have a feasibility study going on the city of Mesa trying to look at owning our own post-collection facility, so possibly building our own recycling facility. And in addition to that, we also have an RFI, which is a request for information, that we are looking beyond just the Blue Barrel and reaching out to private industry and even other government agencies to see what technologies exist today or what ways can we look beyond just a Blue Barrel recycling program to divert more materials from the landfill. So there's more to come on that. We anticipate in the first quarter of 22, we'll have some significant updates that we'll be able to share. Unfortunately, right now, though, because we are in negotiations or we are in a formal procurement process, that we're not able to share all of the details right now, but that will be coming out in the first quarter of next year.
Great, thank you, Scott. Well, before we sign off today, we want to encourage you to continue to visit the Footprint Future Mesa website. We will continue to post videos from our engagement opportunities there. There are a number of polls. There's an open forum where you can share your ideas. And we've also launched a survey. So what you're seeing on your screen is a QR code that will take you directly to the survey. If you have your phone handy, we encourage you to take the survey and please share it with your family, your coworkers. We really want to ensure we're engaging all areas of the city of Mesa and really taking that feedback from the community into consideration as the city looks to develop the next phase of the climate action plan. So again, thank you for attending. We will post this video tomorrow by this time. If you'd like to take a look back at any of the slides that we showed today, or if you'd like to share the video, it will be there on that Footprint Mesa Future website tomorrow. Thank you for attending, and we do hope to see you at our final engagement opportunity for this series, which will be next Wednesday at noon, and we'll be talking about food systems, as Scott mentioned. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.